I want to start with the words of Adrienne Rich. My heart is moved by all I cannot save. So much has been destroyed. I have to cast my lot with those who, age after age, perversely and with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world. One of my favorite bumper stickers I saw asks, "Where are we going? And where are we in this handbasket?" To some, it would feel that everything is falling apart. Everything is changing for the worse at every turn. The alarmists in our midst will use this to assure us that we are facing end times. The revolution will not be televised, but here comes Honey Boo Boo. Even for universalists, this handbasket seems to be heading someplace hot. But what if everything is not falling apart? What if this is just business as usual? And it's up to us to reframe our response. In some religious circles, people have expressed a desire to heal our broken world. And this sentiment is often couched as part of a mission statement, along the lines of what the Salvation Army has as its mission. The Salvation Army, a growing, loving community of people dynamically living God's mission in a broken world. This same language is very popular among some justice-seeking Christians. I found it in college mission statements, mission trip groups, and from folks who are truly working to improve the lives of the poor. This sentiment is generally summed up something like this: together, we share a quest for justice, peace, reconciliation, and healing in a broken world. Honestly, they lifted this term from the Judaic concept of tikkun olam, which translates as world repair. But I think they took some liberties in the translation and the theology. So, there are people who see our world as broken. These are good, loving people, and they want to make things better. But something about it just kind of sticks in my craw. What is it? Why does that, it's the language. Why does that language make me itchy? That's what happens, I'm getting itchy. Because I really don't have a problem with people who are motivated by their understanding of the holy to go out and do good work. I deeply respect people of any faith tradition who are called to address injustice. So what's this itch over language? I mean, it's just language. Our broken world. What's wrong with recognizing that things are messed up and we could become a blessing to our world by walking humbly and doing justice? It's the broken that sets me on edge. Casting our whole world as broken irks me. I find myself growling. That's how I know something is serious, when I start growling. It ain't broke. It was built this way. Built this way in our natural world and built this way in our human society. Start with the natural world. Rock slides, typhoons, they are part of the entire system of nature. Yes, they cause disruptions of human activities, they cause death and illness, but they're how the whole system works. It's not broken. It's very complex. It's complex beyond my brain's ability to fully comprehend, but it's not broken. But scientists are pretty much in agreement that global climate change is directly caused by human activity. Wouldn't that show that we've broken this world? Yes and no. Yes, our activities have changed the system, but it's not broken, just different. Not very comfortable for us or many of the other species, but it's still a full system. There are no missing parts, nothing was removed, just all of the interlinked parts responding to what happens when you extract and combust fossil fuels. The world is not broken. The natural world is working quite well. And with or without us, it will continue to follow those deep, old laws. So, if anything, it's not that we need to fix it, but we need to go and get things back in balance if we and all of the bears and the bees and the beavers, if we're all going to survive. What about our human society? What do I mean by it's not broken, it's built that way? Well, our brains appear to be hardwired for xenophobia. As a species, we are inherently mistrustful of people outside of our immediate clan. We're built this way, but we overcome it. We learn to greet the stranger in our midst. We learn to find that there's opportunity in diversity. But when that xenophobia becomes institutionalized or rationalized, it's better that way. It's supposed to be that way. It moves from being a residual part of our lizard brain to becoming racism. It prevents us all from accessing the richness of life. Because both the oppressor and the oppressed are limited when there is institutionalized racism. When I say it was built that way, our laws, our financial practices have been built to hold groups of othered people away from resources like education, employment, medical care. For example, why did so many people of color wind up in foreclosure during the Great Recession? It was hard on everybody, but some groups will never recover because of a complex system of practices, all legal, that kept them hemmed into certain neighborhoods and then made a whole lot of money off of them through predatory lending. It wasn't as if somebody said, how can we engineer a system to perfectly oppress people that we're uncomfortable with? Nobody said that. That's pretty much what happened. It's what happens when we don't examine prejudice or even the way our brains work. Nothing was broken. The system worked quite well. A lot of people made a lot of money. In fact, some systems work better when they're unexamined. And that's how evil moves about in this world, buried so deep into our normal that we don't notice until a person nearby cries out. That is how evil moves. Many of the worst parts of our human society are really not broken. They're just unexamined prejudice. any fixing that is to be done is actually the harder work of unpacking and naming and trying to do it better over and over again until there is less unexamined stuff to trip us up. Okay, that's what I mean when I say it ain't broken. Now here's another reason why that whole phrase, broken world, just irks me. It's because it implies that there is a more perfect, more preferred state that has been broken. It presumes that there is a norm that is better than any variation, which is okay as long as you fit the norm. And here's the real reason that I get itchy. It's based upon an underlying theology that I find problematic. Okay? The theology, the one where our world is broken, it comes from an interpretation of the Judeo-Christian creation story. You know this one. In the beginning, there was perfection. Except that, actually, if you read Genesis, you'll notice that there are two beginnings. In the beginning, there was perfection in a garden. And eventually, two humans who were somehow too human, not perfect, despite having been made in God's image. Do you sense a setup here? Okay. The two humans transgressed one rule. Really, this was a setup. Eat anything and everything except that. And perfection was broken because humans were not perfectly obedient, because they were too human, despite having made their God in their own image. This break, this rupture, this banishment and punishment, this is the underpinning of what many Christians interpret as our broken world. Inherent human sinfulness broke God's perfect world, and it continues to break this world. This suggests that they have some assumptions about what perfection would look like. They're trying to fix something that they perceive as broken and restore it to what they would consider whole or mended. If my brain can't comprehend the complexity of the universe, I'm supposed to take it on that other people's understanding of perfection is what we're working towards? Okay, so the problem with presuming that our world is broken is that it's based upon a theology that casts us as inherently bad children who broke something, and now we're trying to fix it. But of course we can't, because there's an omnipotent God who's really in charge, but seems to be waiting for us to live up to or down to his expectations. Can you see why I'm getting itchy here? Okay. Here's where a different kind of theology might change our response. What if, instead of a single, omnipotent, omniscient, judging sky God, what if there was a theology that accepted that perfection includes things that are outside of the norm, things that appear imperfect? We've all seen leaves that grew asymmetrically, or trees that have been misshapen by terrain or weather, and yet they still grow and photosynthesize and bring beauty. We've all seen imperfection and loved it more dearly because of its uniqueness. Think of a beloved. Is it their perfection, their adherence to a norm that you love, or is it their crooked smile? The way that maybe the left eye will crinkle up more when they smile? What if our understanding of perfection includes things that appear broken or imperfect? And what if our understanding of the divine includes our helping to create and recreate this perfect imperfection? Rather than always failing at the task of restoring Eden, what if we are actually tasked with joining in as part of nature, jumping in the middle of the muddy little puddle? What if we are here to create with wild diversity? Nature insists on diversity. Then our job becomes less about fixing and more about participating. Whew. Don't have to fix the world. Okay. Now, I am going to recognize that brokenness is real. I'm going to recognize that things like our immigration system, healthcare system, education system, they were never perfect to begin with. Mostly they are a collection of rash responses to different things. So we don't have a system, we have a collection of rash responses. Anything can be an improvement over a rash response. There really is brokenness in this world. Covenants can be broken. People can be broken. You've known people who were broken. Most of our families have someone who isn't quite okay. Maybe it was trauma or odd neurology or something. But there's someone in the family who wound up broken. And that old judging sky god doesn't seem very interested in helping. How we respond to broken people is how I'll measure our gods. Here's an example. Cousin Guido. In one branch of my extended family, one of our broken ones was Cousin Guido. He wasn't really my cousin. He was my step-grandfather's second cousin, but in an Italian-American family, you're all family. For better or worse, everyone's in. When I was a little kid, I couldn't really tell how old Guido was because he seemed like a young man right up until the moment he became an old man. And that was because when he was a young man, he was sent over to fight in World War II. He was a poor Italian-American kid who was probably a little neurologically vulnerable, but he had no one to speak up for him or assign him to non-combat work. So like too many other poor young men, he was issued a pair of boots and a gun and sent to fight. And when the bombs started exploding and the guns firing all around him, his mind snapped. It was all over. It was what used to be called shell-shocked. Guido got stuck in the middle of that terror, and he stayed there for the rest of his life. Guido's father finally found him in a hospital. Back then, there was really no treatment for that kind of trauma, especially not for poor immigrant families. So his father simply brought him home and prepared to care for his son. Guido's father married a much younger woman with the understanding that she would care for his son when he died. Arcangela, say her name, Arcangela, because she did. She cared for Guido. And the rest of the family cared for him too. My step-grandparents always included Guido in the big family dinners. They took him places. They included him exactly as he was. Not waiting for him to get better, not expecting him to change, not expecting somebody else to change him. Just including him and loving him as the rocking, moaning, terrified person that he was. Have you ever seen that kind of love? The kind of love that keeps loving someone even in their brokenness. What makes it astonishing is because it means finding the holy in the spaces that a God seems to have deserted. If we're going to live and love brokenness, it's going to take a whole different kind of theology that asks us just to live into what is, not in guilt, not as punishment, but in a steady renewal over and over again of what family and love and connection can look like. It took the rest of Guido's life for that love. And he did have tranquility and kindness in his later years. He knew he belonged because it was the work of a family to hold his brokenness, his fragility. And in doing so, it showed us, the younger members of the family, that we didn't have to be perfect to be loved. We simply had to be present. This is the work of creative people, to take what is imperfect and add to it with their love. Not to fix it, but to simply keep creating alongside their God. And such is a God that I will measure us by. May it be so.